Sure.
All right, I'll do the sponsor, and then after the sponsor, you kick in with your sermon, and then let me know when. I'll try to wrap us up.
All right, we're
Sounds good.
going. So whenever you're ready.
All right, I'm getting the timer up. This is episode 13, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Post Thanksgiving.
We don't need to talk about what number it is.
Well, you
Welcome
got a month.
to. Oh, well.
Man,
And go.
Welcome to another episode of the Living Water Boys. We are glad you have joined us today. I'm coming at you from Alexandria, Virginia. I am Mick Bryan, joined by the Reverend Big Al in Raleigh and producer Will the Thrill in Columbia, South Carolina. How are you guys doing right now?
Doing great. How are you?
Fabulous. You know, this is an exciting time in the life of a living water boy. We've got the ACC Big Ten Challenge on the horizon, college football's championship weekend, and the beginning of Advent. I mean, Reverend Big Al, does it get any better than this?
absolutely not, McBrien. And you know what? We're coming off what I would consider to be the greatest pastor's holiday of the year, that of Thanksgiving, because it's a holiday. It's on Pastor's Weekend, kicking off on a Thursday, and it's absolutely non-religious, so it means we don't have to do any work. So I should be well refreshed and ready to go for another episode tonight, and I'm assuming you are too. It's been good to have a weekend of food, football, basketball, and other sports, and I'm ready to get to talking.
Hey, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't see why we don't have Thanksgiving every month. So you're ready to get to talking, and I know that all of our listeners are ready to hear about the ACC Big Ten Challenge. I love the ACC Big Ten Challenge because I'm not about, wins and losses as much as I am sometimes about conference supremacy. When it comes to football, there's no question that the ACC is the strongest conference in the land. But
Three
in
and one versus
basketball,
the SEC on Saturday, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah, 3-1 this past weekend. I'm looking at you, Georgia. But, when it comes to basketball, there's some debate, right? And the ACC Big Ten Challenge is a chance for the ACC to really flex and show what it's made of. So we're going to give you picks for every ACC Big Ten Challenge game. Now, this starts on Monday, November 28th. That's tomorrow from our time of recording right now. And we got a hot one kicking the tournament off from Tallahassee, Florida State, Minnesota. Who do you like in this one?
Oh, easily going with the Seminoles. You know, they're coming off a tough weekend, choking that game to Temple in the final seconds when Jonathan Isaac blew a layup on Thursday. Did come back to defeat Illinois on Friday, a really poor Illinois team. So I'm looking for the Seminoles to roll Minnesota on Monday night. Minnesota shouldn't even show up.
Yep, Leonard Hamilton, Ninja Turtle. He's going to bring it to him. Hey, Monday night, 9 o'clock, Wake Forest, Northwestern. I've got the Demon Deacons. Don't need to really think twice about this. Northwestern, just a historically poor Power 5 team. I got the Deacons. What about you?
I'm going out on a big limb here. I think Northwestern not only beats Wake Forest on Monday night, but absolutely makes the NCAA tournament this year. That's right. You heard it here. A landmark season for the Wildcats.
Wow, that is really going out on a limb. I'm going to say
Never
there's no
happened
chance.
before.
It's never happened, just like the William and Mary tribe. But things really get exciting on Tuesday, November 26th. Right here, just across the river for me, we got Pittsburgh at Maryland. Maryland just won the Barclays Challenge on a layup in overtime by Melo Trimble. It'd be great if they were still in the ACC and could go back to the Barclays Center for the ACC tournament
No,
this
it wouldn't.
year,
Nobody
but they're
wants them
not.
in our league.
They're not. I miss them. So
Everybody's happier.
they play Pittsburgh. How's Pittsburgh going to do as the ACC? Are they going to punish Maryland, or will Maryland show them who's boss?
Oh, gosh. Nothing gives me more pain than to admit that I think Maryland's going to pull it out in College Park on Tuesday night.
All right, I think it's kind of a no-brainer there, too, to pick Maryland over Pitt. Also at 7 o'clock on the U, we got Georgia Tech, Penn State.
Georgia Tech probably not going to win a game in the league this year and not going to win a game in the ACC Big Ten Challenge either. I'm going with the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, hey, I'm with you there too. And that game is in University Park in Pennsylvania. I think home court plays a huge impact on the ACC Big Ten Challenge. That's
Absolutely.
why in our next matchup, 7:30 on Tuesday, Syracuse at Wisconsin. Got to go with the Badgers in Madison.
I'm going to disagree with you here. Syracuse coming off a big loss to South Carolina Gamecocks over the weekend. I know Will the Thrill was paying attention to that one. But you know what? I think they rebound. It's odd for Syracuse to play any games outside the state of New York before January. But you know what? Haven't been impressed with Wisconsin this year. Nigel Hayes really doesn't look like he's stepped up enough to replace some of the stars they've had the past couple of years. I think the Orangemen win in Madison.
Wow. Now, speaking of just, when I think Syracuse, I think historic ACC team, been there forever, right? Another one of those, Notre Dame, going to host Iowa in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Who do you have there?
Notre Dame has been hot this year, and Iowa has been anything but. I saw them play some defense on Friday night, and by defense I mean it looked like they were playing 3-on-5 because UVA got nothing but layups. Going with the Fighting Irish on this one.
He's got the Irish. Hey, people in Raleigh are a little excited about NC State. They're traveling up to face the Fighting Illini on the U at 9 o'clock Tuesday night. I'm going to go with NC State.
Me too. Yet again, NC State seems to get the worst team in the Big Ten as their ACC Big Ten Challenge opponent. You know, something's always up with these matchups, but I think the Wolfpack pulls it out on Tuesday night.
Yeah, speaking of worst teams, there was a team that failed to cover at home against William & Mary. That's right, the Duke Blue Devils. They host Michigan State at 9:30 on Tuesday. I like the Dukies at home. I went to the ACC Big Ten Challenge game when they hosted Indiana last year and Michigan 2 years ago. They won both those. I like Duke at home.
I do too. I mean, we just saw Tom Izzo apologize to his team for such a difficult schedule. I mean, what's next? Are parents going to apologize to their kids for letting them move out of kindergarten? This is pathetic. I'm going with the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I don't know what Izzo was thinking there. I mean, sorry, players, I'm getting you tournament ready. I think it's ridiculous to issue an apology. So moving on to the Wednesday games at 7 o'clock, we got Louisville hosting the big bad Boilermakers from Purdue. Will this be any challenge for the Cardinals?
Could be a slight challenge. Caleb Swanigan certainly a force in the paint for the Boilermakers, but I think Mangkok Mathiang will take care of him for Louisville, and I expect their pressure defense to be too much for Purdue's guards.
Now, one I've got circled for Wednesday at 7 o'clock is the chance to avenge the loss in the 2012 Sugar Bowl when Virginia Tech travels to Ann Arbor to take on the Michigan Wolverines. You might remember that Sugar Bowl when Danny Cole clearly caught a touchdown to win the game from Logan Thomas. No, they said it hit the ground, but I don't think it did. So,
After review,
Buzz Williams
still incomplete.
That up in the locker room. But frankly, I like Michigan at home. What about you?
I'm going to go against you here. This is almost as painful as admitting Maryland might win, but I like the Hokies to pull it out. Especially Michigan has not been impressive. Another team that got run off the floor by the Gamecocks over the weekend.
Wow, this is Alan P. Smith at real Alan P. Smith, I believe, who just said, quote, "I like the Hokies." You heard it here on Living Water Boys. Another 7 o'clock game. You know, this one just screams ACC Big Ten Classic, Miami and Rutgers and Coral Gables. Give me Larinaga easy.
Absolutely agree. You know, Miami, another team coming off a rough weekend. They certainly spent too much time at the Magic Kingdom and not enough playing basketball while in their tournament at Orlando over the weekend, losing 2 games, but I expect them to rebound. Nothing helps you get better at basketball than seeing Rutgers across the court.
Yeah, it's just really exciting to see them on the schedule. You know, speaking of schedules, sports schedules, not academic schedules, we have the UNC Tar Heels traveling to Bloomington to face Indiana. Of course, we saw what happened to Indiana when they played Fort Wayne, and we got that glorious picture of that elderly woman doing the surrender cobra. Because of that, I'm leaning towards the Tar Heels at Indiana.
Absolutely agree. They looked great out in Maui, and I think they keep it rolling in Bloomington. Too much size, too much rebounding power with Kennedy Meeks and Isaiah Hicks and Tony Bradley.
Yeah. All right. We got two more left. First, we're going to go down to Little John. Yeah. Clemson hosts Nebraska. Man, another mouth-watering matchup on the U. I'll take the Tigers. I don't think anyone's really going to show up or be paying much attention due to the fact that they're focused on the ACC football championship this weekend. But I got Clemson at home over Nebraska.
I'm going to agree with you on that one. It'll be interesting to see if Clemson can live up to some early season hype, although they haven't quite emerged in all their games so far.
Yeah. Now, lastly, we could get a little drum roll, please, here. There's been some talk on the Living Water Boys about the University of Virginia's basketball team not getting the respect that it deserves. But I think whoever picked these matchups recognized matching greatness with greatness and matching up UVA versus Ohio State, not only creating this matchup, but putting the game at John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville. So I think we might have a guess as to how Big Al picks, but what are you thinking about UVA hosting Ohio State?
Well, first of all, it's about time UVA's in Charlottesville for this challenge after 2 straight road games in the challenge when everyone else gets to rotate. But sure, fair matchup, whatever. We got UVA, who's in the top 10, versus Ohio State, who's not even ranked. Listen, Purdue was lined up to face the Hoos, which we were really excited about, but then in Ohio State going to Louisville. But then everyone realized that Jaquan Lyle, one of the star players for Ohio State, was one of the named players in the Louisville recruiting scandal. So we just couldn't have him going to play at the Yum Center and instead move their game to Charlottesville. Certainly not a fair fight for Thad Matta and his boys. I expect UVA to continue their early season roll, winning by double digits yet again.
Yeah, while it's clear that the ACC is the cream of the crop here, they haven't won since 2008. The Big Ten won the last 2 years. Then there were a couple ties. The Big Ten won the 3 before that. So while the ACC reigned supreme from 99 to 2008, they haven't really, been the winners since I was in high school. That's a while. So I'm taking the ACC to win this year, to break that streak and get back in its rightful place of dominance.
Same here. Certainly a conference that's looking to have 10, 11, maybe even 12 bids to the NCAA tournament needs to show up very well in a showcase like this.
That's right. Well, it's great to see meaningful basketball back. Mid-November was not too exciting. Thanksgiving gets the juices flowing, and the ACC Big Ten Challenge is always exciting before the players take a little break to do what are these things they have, or their exams. They go to class sometimes. They have to do this so they can play next semester. That's right, exams coming up. They take a little break for that. So enjoy your basketball this week.
That's right. No one's more excited about basketball ramping up than UVA fans. So let's get moving. But before we go too far into basketball, do want to keep an eye towards conference championship football weekend. I mean, certainly teams play football and players, they play football for one reason, and that's, like you said, championships, not of life, but of conferences. And so here we are, finally got to the big weekend. We have conference championship games, and so we're going to go through and give you our predictions. McBrien, we're going to start with the MAC championship game, Friday night, 7 o'clock. The Western Michigan fighting PJ Flex against the Ohio fighting Frank Soliches. We got Western Michigan as a 19-point favorite. It certainly looks like they have it locked up. What do you think? Who wins this game on Friday night?
Well, I just got to tip my hat to Maction. There have been, in my life, dozens of lonely Tuesday and Wednesday nights in just the end of fall, beginning of winter, and Maction has filled a hole like few other things can. So this year I was really excited to see College Game Day go to Western Michigan and give Maction some love. And I think Fleck and them boys cover against Ohio. No one's going to watch this game. They're going to have it on before they flip over to the Pac-12. But, hey, this guy's got everything going for him. He's coaching the number 13 team in the nation. I don't know if you saw, but he got remarried just this past year in Hawaii. I mean, this guy needs to buy some lottery tickets.
Yeah, I think the big question is, where will PJ Fleck coach the game after this game? Meaning, what big job does he take after this great season? Or does he wait, hoping that he can get even better offers a year from now, a la Tom Herman? And we saw how that worked out. Let's move on. We got Colorado coming off their big late game win against Utah last night, against Washington, who just blew out Washington State in the Apple Cup on Friday night. The Pac-12 championship game, Friday night, 9 o'clock. We got the Huskies as 7-point favorites. Colorado's had a dream season, McBride. Does it continue on Friday night and potentially wreck Washington's plans to make the college football playoff?
Absolutely not. Washington was pretty wrecked when they lost in primetime a few weeks ago. And you had to feel for that fan base who got up so early for game day on the West Coast and just really saw everything fall apart. But the way the college football season has played out, they're back controlling their own destiny, ranked number 4. I think the fans make the trip down to Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, and I think they take care of the Colorado Buffaloes. But you got to tip your hat to them. Who really saw us, the Living Water Boys, talking about them as we transition to December? I didn't.
Not me either. Brian, I agree with you. I like the Huskies. Their offense has just been so explosive all season. Would have loved to see the Southern Cal Trojans get another shot at Washington after beating them up in Seattle a couple weeks ago, but was not to be. Colorado won the South Division of the Pac-12, and I expect Washington to win and move forward. Let's move on. Saturday, high noon, the AAC, American Athletic Conference Championship game. Teams you thought you might see, like Houston, who's been all over the headlines this year, did not even make it. We got Temple, the Fighting Owls, playing against the Midshipmen. We got Navy as a 3-point favorite. Listen, Navy has been rolling through their past few opponents. What do you expect to see on Saturday?
No question they continue to roll. I don't know who's setting these odds at 3 points, but they're playing at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. Midshipmen are going to roll.
I agree. I think the only concern is, might Navy be looking ahead to their big matchup with Army the next weekend? Amazing that they're playing their conference championship game before their regular season ends. But that's how those Keydets do it, and I think they're going to keep rolling. That option attack has just been too explosive recently. Although Temple could keep it close, Matt Rule's a heck of a coach there. I'm going to move on to the Conference USA Championship game. Louisiana Tech against Western Kentucky. You guys know I love Big Red and the Hilltoppers. They are 7.5-point favorites. What do you see happening here, Brian?
So often I find myself needing someone to top a hill. And it's in times like those where I cry out to the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. However, I'm going with Louisiana Tech. I think they're going to pull it out. Do they still have Holtz? Do you know?
I'm going to go with yes on that one, but I know they don't have Tim Rattay. He graduated back in maybe 98. Kenneth Dixon making his name for the Ravens. I think this is all about the Hilltoppers.
I miss Lou Holtz so much that I'm willing to hitch my wagon to anything Holtz. So, that being said, let's go Louisiana Tech Bulldogs.
Bold pick. We'll see what happens. Certainly one folks are looking forward to down in Atlanta, where the ACC Championship could have been, if you remember our suggestions from a few episodes back. We got Alabama against Florida. Alabama, a whopping 23-point favorite. Certainly doesn't seem like that's enough points. In the SEC Championship game, 4 o'clock on Saturday. What do you think, Brian? Right over left? Will we see much fight out of the Gators?
Nope, it'll be over after the first quarter.
I'm not even sure it'll last that long. Jalen is going to put quite a hurting on the Gators. Listen, if they couldn't keep up with Florida State, how are they going to keep up with Alabama? I don't even think that game's worth watching. Let's move on. We got the the Mountain West Conference Championship game. San Diego State and Wyoming, Saturday night at 7:45. Big primetime matchup that few people will watch. What do you think, Brian? We got San Diego State as 7-point favorites with their star running back, Donnell Pumphrey, setting all kinds of records, really making fans forget about Marshall Faulk's career that ended 25 years ago. What do you think about that game?
Hey, this game's in Laramie. Give me the Cowboys at home. It's going to be bitter cold in Wyoming. And these Aztecs coming up from San Diego State, they're just going to be counting down the minutes until they can come home. And I think the Pokes take the Mountain West in a game that dozens will watch on ESPN.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are overreacting to Wyoming's loss to New Mexico last night. Bob Davie certainly had his boys ready to go for New Mexico, but I think the real key there was Wyoming didn't even need to win the game after Boise State choked against Air Force on Friday. So I think they were just resting their guys. They'll be ready to play next week. We got two more. One I know everyone's looking forward to, the Clemson Tigers, the Virginia Tech Hokies on Saturday night in Orlando. Brian, I know you're a little bit of a homer here. What do you think about this game? We got Clemson as 9.5-point favorites.
Man, this really just it's just which team is going to show up. Is it going to be the strong Clemson we saw take down Louisville at home, or the Clemson who tried to hand NC State the game on a platter? NC State's so bad they didn't know how to take it. They did hand the game to Pitt on a platter. I just don't see a full, complete team out of Dabo's boys, despite whatever craziness he's yelling about in the locker room. But the same thing is true with the Hokies. It's just kind of a toss-up who's going to show up. But you know what? Clemson has everything to play for, and Virginia Tech doesn't. If they win this game in Orlando, they're probably going to go back to the same stadium for the Russell Athletic Bowl, which is, frankly, not crazy exciting. They've got nothing to lose. I think they go all out and shock the Clemson Tigers, and you see a lot of sad Dabo shots late Saturday night as they miss the playoff.
Well, that certainly would be a shocker. It would be a blow for the ACC to miss out on the playoffs altogether in that case, most likely. But I just think Clemson's got way too much talent. So many weapons on the outside with Mike Williams, Jordan Leggett at tight end. Watson certainly looked good last night against the Gamecocks. And, you know, that defensive line, they certainly have been rolling through guys this year, and I think they keep it going on Saturday. And then finally, the Big Ten championship game, Wisconsin and Penn State, certainly two teams that nobody wants to watch play football. We got Wisconsin at 2.5-point favorites. Big game, Saturday night, 8 o'clock. What do you think, Brian? Will James Franklin and his assistants, who all have hot wives per his requirement, win the game on Saturday night?
No. I think Wisconsin's going to win. I think it's not going to be remotely exciting. And, you know, people will be flipping from Fox to ABC to watch the ACC championship. But give me the Badgers.
Well, I agree that it won't be exciting. Looking for a low-scoring game with these Big Ten 3 yards and a cloud of dust teams. But I'm going to go with the Nittany Lions here. Really impressed with Trace McSorley, you know, another quarterback from the state of Virginia that left the state for his college football. But he's been playing well recently, and I think he keeps it up against the Badgers on Saturday night. I don't think Wisconsin's offense is going to be able to keep up. That being said, don't think it'll be enough as Penn State's multiple losses keep it out of the playoff even with a championship on Saturday night. Well, there you have it, folks. Should be an exciting weekend of conference championship games as the football season winds down. But keep your heads up because conference championships means one thing. That's right, bowl season. We're rolling ahead, and be on the lookout for Living Water Boys Listener League Bowl Pick'em because nothing gets us more excited than bowl season during that Christmas to New Year post-Advent hangover that us ministers love to enjoy when there are several games on every day. And who even knows if the players are trying or just picking up their swag bags and taking a seat on the bench. But that being said, it's time for another word from our sponsors, and then we'll come back with some sermon review from Mick Bryan. But Here it is from our sponsors. Take a listen. Well, it's time for everyone's favorite weekend of the year. That's right, we go from Black Friday to Cyber Monday to Giving Tuesday. Well, it's your opportunity to participate because nothing says giving and Merry Christmas more than the gift of the Living Water Boys. That's right, now even you can be a part of this special program, or your loved ones. That's right, if you want to have a few minutes on the air with McBrien, Will the Thrill, and the Reverend Big Al, now you can. For just a few dollars, we're not really sure how much, and prices are very negotiable. We might even accept food or other donations in lieu of money. But for any sort of price you're willing to give, we'll be able to offer you some sort of time frame being on the episode itself. So are you looking for your big break? Are you looking for your opportunity to spew your hot takes on sports and church life? Or are you just looking to sit back and answer some questions from our loyal listeners? Well, this is your chance. So before you click buy on Cyber Monday, or before you click donate on Giving Tuesday, think about giving the gift of the Living Water Boys this Christmas season. It'll certainly make those of us here at the Living Water Boys happy that we can pay our bills. Amen to that. Thanks for listening.
Wow, as you're looking at your Christmas list, wondering just what exactly am I going to get this person? I think nothing could fill that more appropriately than the gift of them being a guest on the Living Water Boys. Now, last time we talked about church life, we got to hear a little bit about Reverend Big Al from the pulpit. And since we've last joined you, I have had the joy of preaching, and it was on Sunday, November 13th. Yes, that's right. The Sunday after the election. Now, I was told about this months in advance, was given the scripture months in advance, and really thought nothing of it. Now, Reverend Big Al's church is on the lectionary, which is something I really respect, and I really have enjoyed when I've worked at churches that are on the lectionary. The church where I currently am does sermon series, which I also like. There's definite merits to both. Now, we did an election sermon series, election themed. It was 3 weeks. So all that being said, it was impossible to ignore what was going on in the world from the pulpit and through worship. And I think that's a really good thing, because to ignore the reality of the election and all of the emotions that came with it, frankly, would have been irresponsible. So we were doing the election series, and our passage was, for the Sunday after the election, was Romans 13, during which Paul basically says, you got to submit to the authorities. They are God's servants for your good. Now, this past election cycle just showed how crazy frustrated most people in America were with our elected authorities. So to preach that God's word says they're God's servants for our good, and that we should support them, get behind them, submit to them, was really tough. Reverend Big Al would tell you, I was texting him some during that week going, dang, man, this is a tough sermon. And of the dozen or so that I have done, this was the first one, frankly, that kept me up at night a little bit. Because if you stand behind the pulpit and solely talk about politics or what's going on in the world, that's wrong. That's not what the place of the pulpit is for. But at the same time, you got to acknowledge the reality of what's going on in the world. And you would be blind to not notice that members of the body of Christ were really hurting that week. And some stories that I have heard from both church members and people who weren't church members, frankly, were really depressing. Some things that were said to their face from strangers, acquaintances, classmates. So that had to be addressed. And how did it go in the sermon? I did my best. And, I'll have to review the tape. I usually like to do it about a month out. But man, it was just one of the most interesting Sundays in my life in ministry. The anticipation to hear something, some sort of hope or comfort or clarity. And while uncomfortable at times, I think it was a really special space that us, the pastors, were able to step into. What was it like for you down there in Raleigh, Reverend Big Al?
Well, certainly difficult. Similar reasons. I think, for me, I offered a pastoral prayer on that same Sunday where we tried to focus on the need for some unity following the election, which became even more interesting given so many difficult emotions that many in our congregation were feeling coming out of the election. And, we took a passage from Romans 12 just in front of where you were, Brian, and I tried to remind everybody, even in that pastoral prayer, that our response is not to fight the process, it's not to flee away from this country, but to instead identify those that we might think would be marginalized or oppressed, and think about how we can look after them. So just like in the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus is telling the analogy of the sheep and the goats and says, for when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I think the call for us in such a situation is to think about how we can look for those who are hungry, those who are thirsty, maybe those who are refugees, those who are feeling that the government doesn't care about them, and look out for them. So hopefully that gave some folks a sense of peace, but also a sense of purpose following what has been a difficult and certainly negative in terms of the campaigning election season. But I want to go back to you and your sermon, Brian. What do you kind of feel like was the main idea that you tried to leave folks with? Certainly preaching on a text that says submit to your government authorities following an election where certainly in your area of the country, Northern Virginia as itself was a blue state, but particularly Northern Virginia, where you're located, a very densely blue area where a red candidate was elected. How do you talk to folks like that about how they should submit to a candidate that they probably didn't want in office?
So I took a route that I tend to take when it's possible. I studied the classics in college. There were about a dozen of us at William & Mary. Really nerdy academic route to take. But for this sermon, I basically looked at the Roman government during the time of Paul when he was writing Romans. And that government was not pro-Christian, would not have lined up with the morals and mission of the early church. Yet the church thrived under it through their obedience. The Roman government, the Roman Empire was a vehicle that allowed the early church apostles to spread the word, to travel on these great roads. They recognized, the goodness that was the government, even though the leaders would not have agreed with them when it came to their faith and what they were all about. So I tried to draw some parallels there, and I think that hopefully that made some connections for some, because some people like to get up in arms or emotional if we don't have just a great morally awesome public figures such as the Reverend Big Al in office. When people fall short of these standards church folks put up, they think everything's going to be terrible. And I was trying to communicate that was not the case for the life of Paul, and look what happened to the church.
Absolutely, and this is probably a conversation that would be neat for us to continue on a future episode, but I really think there's something to be said for the relationship between the church and the state, and really what it might have been like to be a Christian during the days of the early church, where it wasn't a Christendom culture, it wasn't popular, and I think it made for a different faith community than what we deal with today. So I think that's a great way of reminding folks that the days of the early church, where the Christian faith, the Christian religion was just spreading throughout the countryside, throughout Asia Minor, Turkey, all those areas, with Paul being such a devoted missionary. It's interesting to see what Christianity really means in a world where it's not clouded by what the government thinks. So I think it'll be an interesting way for us to live out our faith, even in the midst of some difficult circumstances. Thank you for bringing that up. I don't want us to go too far, though, without getting away from one of our favorite hobbies, which is, as you know, McBride, sermon titling. So if you don't mind telling us what you titled your sermon, but also maybe some other ideas you had or some different avenues, maybe we can kick a few ideas around in case a similar topic comes up in the future.
So this was one of those sermons where I didn't really have a lot to say in the title. It was kind of already there, and it was Civil Obedience, which was a pretty interesting one given the context of everything that was going on in the world. So frankly, I didn't open the door to thinking about what a creative title might have been. Does anything come to mind for you?
Well, I certainly like where you go there with civil obedience. I know one that comes to mind to me for any of you Seinfeld fans, Civility Now, a play on the episode where George and his father Frank are yelling Serenity Now throughout the episode. Of course, that led to the great comment, Insanity Later, at the end of the episode, but that might have been a fun one. I just don't know how many Seinfeld fans in your congregation might have picked up on it, the play on words there or not. But that's the main one that comes to mind offhand. I'll have to keep thinking about it. Certainly, as always, we're welcome to any feedback from our listeners. If you think of any sermon titles that Brian could have used for this episode, for this particular message as well.
Yeah, while I didn't quite have the option of naming it, I think it saved me a lot of time because I like to spend a lot of time doing that. But yeah, I couldn't think of anything that was I could allude to like you did Seinfeld-wise there.
Well, certainly also an opportunity to play on the idea of submission, although that carries some connotations depending on what setting you're in. Of course, with me, submission immediately takes me to not just the octagon and UFC fighting, but the squared circle and the many various submission moves that we see employed every time wrestling is on. But anyway, that's something to think about. There might have been a way to think about tapping out to some of those submission moves, but as we know, in the United States, we don't tap out. We reach for the rope, we break the hold, and we continue to spread the word of God in all that we do. I'm not even sure if that analogy makes sense, but we're going to close with it because I think we're out of time here on the Living Water Boys. As always, thank you for listening. You can catch us always at Living Water Boys on Twitter, at Living Water Boys, and also at our email, livingwaterboys@gmail.com. We always appreciate getting your feedback and your questions, and we'll be happy to bring those up on future episodes. But Advent has started, and we hope you look forward to a season of waiting. And as you do, look forward to waiting for the Living Water Boys to pop back up on your iTunes playlist after listening to this episode. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk at you next time.